I never thought I'd find my sister wearing my perfume in my garden, in my fiancé's arms, 3 days before my wedding. But that moment of betrayal wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even the worst part. Earlier that day, the afternoon sun filtered through the stained glass windows of Westlake's abandoned St. Agnes Cathedral, casting jewel-toned light across my hands as I carefully examined the crumbling plasterwork. Restoration was always a delicate balance between preserving history and ensuring structural integrity, knowing exactly which pieces to save and which to rebuild. The original craftsman used horsehair in this plaster, I explained to my assistant, running my fingers along the ornate ceiling medallion. That's why it's lasted a century despite the water damage. We'll need to custom match this formula. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Found the vintage doorknobs for the east wing. Perfect match to the original blueprints. Can't wait to show you tonight. I smiled, tucking the phone away. In 53 days, I'd be marrying a man who got equally excited about authentic Victorian hardware. We'd met at a heritage preservation conference where we'd argued passionately about the ethics of modern materials in historical restorations. 6 months later, we were collaborating on projects. 18 months after that, he proposed in the Victorian library we'd saved together. Some people called me controlling, methodical, too careful. But I'd learned early that beautiful things require structure to survive. Buildings, relationships, lives. You couldn't just follow passion and hope for the best. You needed blueprints, foundation, careful attention to stress points. I'd built my life and my business with that philosophy. Blackwood Architectural Restoration was now the premier firm in 3 states. My relationship with Ethan had the same solid foundation. Shared values, compatible goals, deep respect, and yes, love. Not the chaotic, consuming kind my sister chased across continents, but something sustainable, something built to last. Ms. Blackwood. My assistant's voice pulled me back to the present. The structural engineer needs you to sign off on the support beam assessment. I nodded, brushing plaster dust from my hands. I'll be right there. I didn't know then that while I was preserving history, my own future was already beginning to crumble. That some foundations, no matter how carefully laid, can't withstand certain kinds of betrayal. And I had no idea that the most dangerous cracks often start in places you never think to look. Beautiful soul. I see you there, listening to my story in the quiet moments of your day. Thank you for being here with me. We all build something in this life, don't we? Whether it's a career, a relationship, a family, or simply the person we're becoming. We lay each brick with such care, believing in the strength of our foundation. What have you built that you're most proud of? Something you've poured your heart into, something that represents the best of who you are. Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and there's something powerful about knowing we're all architects of our own lives, even when those lives take unexpected turns. If this story resonates with you, please like and subscribe. It helps others find these moments of connection we're creating together. My restoration business began with a single Victorian porch I saved from demolition during college. By 32, I'd preserved historic buildings across the Northeast, from crumbling lighthouses to gilded age mansions. My team of 20 specialized craftspeople shared my obsession with authenticity. We'd once spent 6 months recreating a hand-carved banister using only tools available in 1887. You treat these buildings like they're alive, Ethan had observed during our first project together. They are alive, I'd replied. They hold memories, secrets. They've witnessed generations of human drama. Our job is to help them tell their stories for another 100 years. Ethan Hargrove understood this instinctively. As an architectural historian with a background in engineering, he brought both passion and precision to preservation. Where I saw beauty in ornate details, he saw the brilliant mathematics behind flying buttresses and load-bearing arches. Together we were unstoppable, my artistic vision and his technical expertise creating perfect balance. He was 36 when we met, with thoughtful gray eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled and an encyclopedic knowledge of architectural periods that matched my own. Unlike previous relationships where I'd felt pressured to downplay my intensity, Ethan appreciated my drive. We could spend hours discussing the merits of different restoration approaches or exploring abandoned buildings together, flashlights in hand, discovering hidden treasures others had forgotten. Our engagement came during the grand reopening of Westlake's Victorian Library, a project that had nearly bankrupted my company but ultimately established us nationally. While the mayor gave his speech about preserving community heritage, Ethan had quietly led me to the rare book room we'd painstakingly restored. "This room exists because you fought for it," he'd said, gesturing to the hand-carved shelves and restored reading nooks. "You saw possibility where everyone else saw decay." He'd knelt then, offering not a diamond but a small brass key. "This opens the private archives beneath the library. I've arranged for us to have lifetime access to the historical documents. Will you build a life with me, Mira? One with the same care and vision you bring to everything you touch." It wasn't a conventional proposal, but it was perfect for us. We'd spent that night among centuries-old blueprints and city records, planning both restoration projects and our future together. Our wedding was designed with the same attention to detail, a ceremony in Westlake's oldest garden, surrounded by historic architecture we'd helped preserve. We'd purchased Thornfield Estate, a neglected property on the edge of town with good bones and terrible wiring. The renovation would be our first project as a married couple, turning the crumbling mansion into both our home and a showcase for our preservation philosophy. Everything was proceeding according to plan, until it wasn't. The first disruption arrived in the form of a text message. "Surprise! Back in the States. Need sister time. Pick me up at airport tomorrow. So Jade." My sister Jade operated on impulse, not itineraries. 3 years my junior, she'd spent her 20s and early 30s bouncing between continents, relationships, and careers, teaching English in Japan, leading tours in Peru, apprenticing with a glassblower in Venice. Most recently, she'd been restoring antique textiles in Morocco, a job she'd mentioned in her sporadic emails with characteristic enthusiasm. When I picked her up at the airport, she emerged from the terminal in a swirl of vibrant fabrics and jangling bracelets, her dark hair now streaked with turquoise, her smile as magnetic as ever. "Mira!" She dropped her bags to throw her arms around me. "God, look at you! All polished and perfect as usual. What happened to Morocco?" I asked as we loaded her excessive luggage into my sensibly restored vintage Volvo. "Your last email said you were staying through the summer." Something flickered across her expressive face, a shadow quickly replaced by her usual brightness. "Creative differences with my mentor. Plus, my big sister's getting married. How could I miss that?" I didn't press, though experience suggested creative differences likely involved someone's husband or boyfriend. That was Jade, intensely passionate until she wasn't, leaving emotional wreckage in her wake. "You can stay with us until you find a place," I offered, already mentally rearranging wedding preparations to accommodate her presence. "Us?" She raised an eyebrow. "I finally get to meet the famous Ethan." "He's excited to meet you too." I navigated through traffic, adding carefully, "We have the guest house at Thornfield you could use. It's small but private." What I didn't say, I'd learned long ago that Jade burned too brightly to be contained in close quarters. Her chaotic energy had a way of disrupting carefully ordered spaces, both physical and emotional. "My perfect sister, the estate owner." Jade laughed, but something in her tone made me glance over. For a moment, I caught an expression I couldn't quite identify, something harder than her usual carefree demeanor. Then she smiled again, and I dismissed it as travel fatigue. "It'll be just like old times," she said, squeezing my arm. "The Blackwood sisters together again." I had no idea how prophetic and how devastating those words would prove to be. The first strange moment came during dinner that night. I'd prepared Ethan for Jade's arrival, describing my sister's free-spirited nature and warning him about her tendency to command attention in any room. "She sounds fascinating," he'd said, setting the table with the vintage china we'd found at an estate sale. "I'm looking forward to meeting the other Blackwood." When I introduced them, something unexpected flickered across Ethan's face. A brief disorientation, quickly masked. Jade showed no reaction beyond her usual charm, complimenting him on the restoration plans he showed her for Thornfield. "You have an amazing eye for potential," she told him, leaning closer than necessary over the blueprints. "Seeing beauty beneath decay, that's a rare gift." "Mira's the visionary," Ethan replied, though I noticed he didn't move away. "I just handle the structural elements." "Don't let him fool you," I interjected. Ethan convinced the Historical Society to let us salvage the original foundation rather than replacing it entirely. Saved both history and $100,000. Jade's attention remained fixed on Ethan. "I've always appreciated men who understand what lies beneath the surface." Later that week, I returned early from the courthouse project to find them in the kitchen, laughing over coffee. They fell oddly silent when I entered, the conversation shifting abruptly to wedding details. That night, Ethan seemed distracted during dinner, twice calling me by the wrong name before correcting himself with a quick apology and reference to wedding stress. "Did you say Jade?" I asked the second time, setting down my fork. "Did I?" He looked genuinely confused. "Sorry, I've been reviewing contractor bids all day. My brain is scrambled." I might have questioned it further, but my phone rang. The lead craftsman at the courthouse with an emergency about the century-old tile we were restoring. By the time I resolved the crisis, the moment had passed. In the weeks that followed, I noticed other discordant notes. Ethan's occasional confusion about plans we'd made. Jade wearing a perfume remarkably similar to mine. Finding them standing too close in the hallway, conversation stopping when I appeared. Each incident seemed minor in isolation, easily explained by wedding stress, coincidence, or my own increasing absences as the courthouse project demanded more attention. I was building my career's masterpiece while planning my wedding. If some details slipped past my usually meticulous attention, surely that was understandable. Besides, these were the two people I trusted most in the world. What possible reason would I have to worry? The Westlake Courthouse restoration became all-consuming as we entered the final phase. Built in 1892, the building featured irreplaceable marble work, hand-painted ceiling murals, and intricate wood carving, all of which had suffered decades of neglect before the city finally approved the restoration budget. "We've got water damage in the east wing ceiling," my foreman reported one morning. "The original plaster is crumbling faster than expected." "Show me," I said, already calculating timeline adjustments. What should have been a 2-hour site visit stretched into 14 hours of crisis management. The water damage had compromised a load-bearing wall, threatening a ceiling mural that had taken Italian artisans 3 years to complete in the 1890s. I worked alongside my team until midnight, carefully bracing the structure while documenting each step of the emergency intervention. I called Ethan around 10, apologizing for missing dinner. "It's fine," he said, his voice oddly distant. "Jade made pasta. We saved you some. You two doing okay without me?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite the exhaustion weighing on me. "We're managing." Something in his voice made me pause, but then he added, "Just focus on saving your courthouse. We'll be here when you get home." These marathon workdays became the norm as the project deadline loomed. I'd leave before sunrise and return well after dark, often finding Ethan and Jade watching old movies or poring over photo albums in the living room. They developed a comfortable rapport in my absence, finishing each other's sentences, sharing inside jokes I wasn't part of. "You should have seen Ethan trying to hang those curtains in the guest house," Jade laughed one evening as I picked at reheated dinner. "He nearly fell off the ladder when a spider dropped on his shoulder." "That spider was the size of a small dog," Ethan protested with a grin I rarely saw anymore. "I didn't realize you were helping with the guest house," I said, looking between them. "Just keeping busy while you save the architectural world," Jade replied easily. "Someone has to make sure your fiancé doesn't subsist entirely on takeout." I should have been grateful for their friendship. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness, as if I were becoming a visitor in my own life, watching it proceed without me from behind glass. The courthouse unveiling is in 3 weeks, I said, reaching for Ethan's hand across the table. After that, I'm all yours. Wedding planning, honeymoon, everything. He squeezed my hand, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course. We'll be right here, waiting. The we didn't escape my notice. Nor did the fact that he'd forgotten our cake tasting appointment that morning, the third wedding-related commitment he'd missed that week. Watching Jade and Ethan's growing closeness triggered memories I'd long suppressed, patterns established in childhood that seemed to be reasserting themselves in my adult life. I was 7 when Jade was born, old enough to remember life before and after her arrival. Before, quiet order, books carefully arranged on shelves, my parents' focused attention. After, chaos, noise, and a sister who commanded every room with her mere presence. She's just more spirited, our mother would say when teachers complained about Jade's disruptive behavior. The unspoken comparison hung in the air, unlike her serious, responsible sister. By high school, the dynamic was firmly established. I was the achiever, straight A's, student council president, architectural scholarship to Cornell. Jade was the free spirit, artistic, popular, academically indifferent but effortlessly charming. Why can't you be more like your sister? Our father would ask Jade after another disappointing report card. Why would anyone want 2 Miris? She'd retort. 1 perfectionist in the family is enough. The summer before I left for college, I found Jade wearing my prom dress, entertaining my boyfriend in our backyard. Nothing happened, they were just talking, but the image stayed with me. Jade in my clothes, in my space, with someone who was mine. We were just hanging out, she'd said when confronted. God, Mira, not everything is about you. But some things were about me. Like the art school acceptance she'd hidden until after I'd committed to Cornell. Like the time she'd accidentally spilled wine on my thesis presentation the night before it was due. Small sabotages that could always be explained away as carelessness rather than calculation. Moments that made me question my own perceptions rather than her intentions. After our parents died, father from early onset dementia while I was in graduate school, mother from cancer 2 years later, Jade and I had drifted further apart. She'd taken her inheritance and disappeared to Europe, sending occasional postcards from increasingly exotic locations. I'd stayed, built my business, created stability. Now, watching her laugh with Ethan in our kitchen, I wondered if some patterns were destined to repeat themselves, no matter how carefully you tried to build something different. The incident with the ring happened 3 weeks before the wedding. I'd left my engagement ring on the bathroom counter while applying lotion, a momentary lapse in my usually careful habits. When I returned, it was gone. After searching frantically, I found Jade wearing it in the garden, admiring how it caught the light. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice sharper than intended. She looked up, surprised but not embarrassed. "Just seeing how it looks. We have the same hands, you know. Family resemblance." "It's my engagement ring, Jade. Not costume jewelry." "Relax, Mira." She slipped it off, holding it out. "I was just curious. It's beautiful. Ethan has excellent taste." Later that day, I overheard them in the kitchen, their voices low but intense. "You need to tell her," Jade was saying. "Before the wedding. She deserves to know." "It's not that simple," Ethan replied, sounding tired in a way I'd never heard before. "The timing isn't right." They fell silent when I entered, Ethan rubbing his temples as if fighting a headache while Jade busied herself with tea preparation. "Tell me what?" I asked, looking between them. "That we're out of coffee," Jade answered smoothly. "Ethan's been surviving on tea all day. Caffeine withdrawal headache." It was a plausible explanation, yet something felt off, the tension in the room too thick for such a trivial matter. Other concerning moments accumulated. Finding Ethan disoriented in our bedroom, momentarily unsure where he kept his clothes, catching him staring at old photographs with a confused expression, the morning he called me Jade when I brought him coffee in bed. "Wedding stress," he explained when I questioned these lapses. "Plus work pressure. The Wellington project is behind schedule." I accepted these explanations because they aligned with my understanding of the world. Temporary stress causing temporary disruptions. The alternative, that something fundamental was changing in Ethan, in us, was too threatening to the future I'd so carefully designed. Then came the night I found him standing in our darkened kitchen at 3 a.m., staring out the window. "Ethan." I touched his shoulder gently. "Can't sleep." He turned, his expression momentarily blank before recognition dawned. "Mira, I thought I was somewhere else for a moment." "Where?" I asked, suddenly alert. "College, I think." He shook his head as if to clear it. "Just a dream bleeding into wakefulness. Nothing important." But the frequency of these episodes was becoming harder to dismiss, especially when paired with Jade's increasing presence in our daily routines. Preparing Ethan's favorite meals, organizing his medication for migraines, she explained, wearing clothes and perfume increasingly similar to mine. "My dear friend, I wonder if you're feeling that familiar tightness in your chest right now. That sensation when your mind tries to rationalize what your heart already knows. We're taught to trust those closest to us, to explain away the discordant notes in relationships we value. But our intuition speaks in whispers, doesn't it? Those quiet moments of knowing that something isn't right, even when we can't or won't name it. Have you ever ignored those whispers? Dismissed the warning signs in a relationship because acknowledging them would require action you weren't ready to take? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. If this resonates with you, please like and subscribe. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give each other is the courage to trust our own perceptions. The photograph fell from between the pages of Ethan's college yearbook, a book I'd never seen before, discovered while searching for architectural references in his office. The image showed a younger Ethan with his arm around a girl whose face I recognized instantly, despite the different hair color and style. Looking carefree and impossibly young, pressing a kiss to Ethan's cheek while he grinned at the camera. My hands trembled as I turned the photo over. Written in faded ink, ENJ, Spring Formal 2009. The night everything changed. I sat heavily in Ethan's desk chair, the room suddenly airless. They had known each other in college, had dated apparently, and neither had mentioned this rather significant fact during the weeks they'd been reconnecting in my home. Further investigation revealed more photos tucked into the yearbook. Jade and Ethan at parties, on what appeared to be dates, looking very much like a couple. In the final image, they stood with a group of friends, noticeably distant from each other, Jade's expression uncharacteristically serious. I waited in Ethan's office until he returned from his meeting with the contractors. When he entered, I simply held up the photographs. "Explain this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He stared at the images, confusion crossing his features before recognition dawned. "Where did you find those?" "Your yearbook. The one you never mentioned owning." I laid the photos on his desk. "You and Jade dated in college. Were you ever going to tell me?" Ethan sank into the chair opposite me, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't serious, Mira. A brief thing freshman year. Ancient history. Serious enough to attend formal events together. To take couples photos." I tapped the image with the inscription, "The night everything changed." "That sounds significant." "We were kids," he said, his expression pained. "It ended badly. We both moved on. And when she showed up here, you didn't think to mention, 'By the way, I used to date your sister?'" "I didn't immediately recognize her," he said, though something in his tone rang false. "She looks different now." By the time I realized, it seemed awkward to bring up. We were getting along so well, the three of us. Were we? I studied his face, searching for the man I thought I knew. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Jade have been getting along particularly well while I've been working." "That's not fair," he protested. "You've been gone constantly. We've barely seen each other for weeks." The accusation stung precisely because it contained truth. I had been absent, consumed by my project. But that didn't explain the secrecy, the strange behaviors, the growing closeness I'd observed. "What were you discussing in the kitchen that day?" "Yes. When you said the timing wasn't right to tell me something." Ethan's expression shifted. Surprise, then something like resignation. "It's complicated, Mira." "Uncomplicate it," I said, echoing words I'd heard countless times from my detail-oriented contractors. "What exactly is going on between you and my sister?" His answer, hesitant, incomplete, and troublingly vague, only deepened my suspicions. Something was happening beneath the surface of my carefully constructed life, something that threatened everything I'd built. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider that what I was building might not be what I thought it was at all. The morning of our rehearsal dinner dawned with the kind of perfect early autumn weather wedding planners dream about. Crisp air, golden light, leaves just beginning to turn. I should have been focused entirely on final preparations, but the courthouse project had hit another crisis. The original tile manufacturer went out of business in 1937, my restoration specialist explained over the phone. "We found a craftsman who can recreate the pattern, but he needs approval today if we're going to meet the unveiling deadline." I stood in my kitchen, wedding checklist in one hand, phone in the other, trying to balance the culmination of my career with the beginning of my marriage. "Email me the samples. I'll review them between appointments." As I hung up, Jade breezed in wearing a dress nearly identical to one I'd purchased the previous month. "Morning, sis. Big day." I gave her a distracted nod, checking my watch. "The florist is delivering centerpieces at noon. Can you make sure they match the approved design?" "Already handled," she said, pouring coffee. I showed them the inspiration photos, and I confirmed the final menu with the caterer, added that champagne toast you wanted. Her efficiency should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like another small usurpation. Decisions made, arrangements altered, all without my input. "Where's Ethan?" I asked, noticing his absence from our morning routine. "Still sleeping. He had another headache last night." She stirred cream into her coffee with practiced ease. "I gave him one of those pills that help him rest." The casual way she referenced his medication, as if she, not I, was the authority on his health, sent a chill through me. But before I could respond, my phone rang again. The rental company had delivered the wrong chairs for the dinner. "I'll handle it," Jade offered immediately. "You focus on the courthouse crisis. We can't have the great Mira Blackwood's career masterpiece derailed by her wedding." There was something in her tone, a subtle edge beneath the helpfulness, that made me pause. But with dozens of moving pieces demanding attention and only hours until guests would arrive, I pushed my unease aside. "Fine. But no changes to the approved plans," I said firmly. "Everything needs to be exactly as we discussed." Jade smiled, raising her coffee cup in mock salute. "When have I ever not followed your perfect plans?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with decades of history neither of us had fully addressed. But there wasn't time to unpack it now. Not with contractors calling, vendors arriving, and somewhere in the house, a fiancé who increasingly felt like a stranger. By late afternoon, the rehearsal dinner preparations were finally under control. The courthouse crisis had been temporarily resolved with approval for the custom tiles. I'd even found 30 minutes to get my hair styled for the evening. All that remained was checking on the garden, where we'd set up an intimate space for pre-dinner cocktails. The weather forecast promised a perfect sunset, the kind of detail I couldn't have planned but gratefully accepted. I rounded the corner of the house, clipboard in hand, mentally reviewing final arrangements. The garden came into view, the antique wrought iron tables we'd restored, the string lights waiting to be illuminated at dusk, the vintage champagne coupes I'd sourced from an estate sale. And there, beneath the arbor where we would exchange vows in 2 days, stood Ethan and Jade. They didn't see me at first. They were too absorbed in each other. Jade's hands on Ethan's face, his arms around her waist, their foreheads touching in a gesture of intimacy that stopped my breath. She was wearing my perfume again. I could smell it from where I stood. "You remember now, don't you?" she was saying, her voice carrying in the quiet garden. Before Mira. Before everything got so complicated. I remember pieces, Ethan replied, his voice strained. But it's all fragmented. Sometimes I'm not sure what's real and what's. This is real, Jade said, and then she kissed him. The clipboard slipped from my fingers, clattering against the stone path. They broke apart, turning toward the sound. 3 expressions in rapid succession crossed Ethan's face. Confusion, recognition, horror. Jade's reaction was different. A flash of something that looked almost like satisfaction before she stepped back from him. Mira, Ethan said, my name emerging strangled. This isn't, I don't. What it looks like. I finished for him, my voice unnaturally calm as I approached them. Because it looks exactly like my sister and my fiancé embracing under the arbor where we're supposed to be married in 48 hours. Mira, please, Ethan started toward me. His movements unsteady. I'm confused. Something's wrong with me. I keep forgetting things, mixing up. Clearly, I cut him off, unable to bear his excuses. I turned to Jade, who hadn't spoken, who was watching the scene unfold with an expression I couldn't decipher. And you? What's your excuse? She met my gaze directly, something hard and wounded in her eyes. No excuse. Just history repeating itself. You always get everything, Mira. The talent, the success, the perfect life. I just wanted something of my own for once. Something of your own. I repeated, disbelief rising like bile. He's my fiancé. We're getting married this weekend. There are 60 people coming to our rehearsal dinner tonight. Are you more upset about the betrayal or the disruption to your perfect schedule? Jade asked, her voice cutting. Because from where I'm standing, you've been so busy with your precious courthouse that you haven't noticed what's been happening right under your nose. What exactly has been happening? I demanded, looking between them. How long has this been going on? Weeks, Jade said immediately, while simultaneously Ethan protested. Nothing's been going on. Their contradictory responses hung in the air, adding another layer of confusion to the betrayal. Which is it? I asked, my composure beginning to crack. Weeks of deception or nothing at all. We've been meeting when you're working, Jade continued, moving closer to Ethan, who was shaking his head. Reconnecting. Remembering what we had before you came into the picture. Before I broke off, trying to make sense of her words. You dated briefly in college. Years before I met him. Is that what he told you? Jade laughed, the sound brittle. We were engaged, Mira. Until he met you at that conference and suddenly decided I wasn't enough. That's not true, Ethan interjected, his voice rising with distress. Jade, stop. You know that's not how it happened. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this new information with everything I thought I knew. You were engaged to my sister. And neither of you thought to mention this minor detail. Because it never happened. Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. We dated freshman year. It ended badly. I didn't see her again until she showed up here. Liar, Jade hissed. You promised me forever. We were planning our life together until you met her and threw it all away. Ethan turned to me, desperation in his eyes. Mira, she's lying. I don't know why, but none of this is true. You have to believe me. But doubt had taken root, feeding on the strange behaviors I'd witnessed over recent weeks, the secretive conversations, the growing closeness between them. If he'd hidden their college relationship, what else might he have concealed? Then explain the photographs, I said. Explain why you've been calling me by her name. Explain why you're in our wedding garden with your arms around my sister 3 days before our wedding. I can't explain it, he shouted, then immediately winced, pressing his hand to his temple. Something's wrong with me. I keep having these episodes where I'm confused, where past and present blur together. Convenient excuse, Jade interjected. The truth is he's been torn between us, between obligation to you and his real feelings for me. Stop it, Ethan pleaded, looking increasingly pale. Mira, please. I would never betray you. Love you. I don't know what's happening, but it's not what she's saying. I looked between them. My sister's defiant stance, my fiancé's desperate confusion, and felt the foundations of my carefully constructed life crumbling beneath me. The rehearsal dinner starts in 2 hours, I said finally, my voice hollow. 60 people expecting to celebrate our love. What exactly am I supposed to do now? Cancel it, Jade said simply. Or don't. Pretend everything's fine like we always do in this family. Bury the ugly truth beneath a perfect surface. You're good at that. The cruelty of her words, the calculated precision of their delivery, finally broke through my shock. This wasn't just betrayal, it was deliberate destruction. I don't remember leaving the garden. Don't remember walking through the house or getting into my car. The next clear memory is sitting in Eleanor Wright's living room, my former professor and mentor watching me with concern as I stared blankly at the tea she'd placed in my hands. I found them together, I repeated, the words still not feeling real. Under our wedding arbor. She was wearing my perfume. Eleanor, 70 and formidable, had guided my career since graduate school. She'd seen me through professional challenges, my parents' deaths, every major life transition. Now she listened without interruption as I recounted the scene in the garden, the contradictory claims, the history I'd never known existed. And you had no idea they knew each other before? She asked when I finally fell silent. None. Until I found those photographs. I set down the untouched tea. How could I have been so blind? The signs were everywhere. Perhaps, Eleanor said carefully, because you were looking at a different picture entirely. One where your fiancé was trustworthy and your sister was simply being her usual chaotic self. My phone buzzed incessantly. The wedding planner, guests arriving to an empty venue, Ethan's increasingly desperate texts. I silenced it, unable to face any of it. I have to call everyone, I said numbly. Cancel the wedding. Explain somehow. Before you do, Eleanor said, are you certain you have the full story? Their accounts differ significantly. They were embracing under our wedding arbor, I repeated. What more do I need to know? Perhaps what's happening with Ethan. She leaned forward. You mentioned confusion, memory issues, calling you by the wrong name. Those aren't typical behaviors for someone having an affair. Her words penetrated my fog of betrayal, connecting to something I'd been subconsciously tracking but hadn't fully acknowledged, the increasing frequency of Ethan's disorientation, his headaches, the moments when he seemed genuinely lost in his own home. I need to get some things from the house, I said suddenly. While they're at the dinner. If it's even still happening. Eleanor nodded. Use my spare room as long as you need. Whatever you decide, you shouldn't be alone tonight. I slipped into our darkened house just after 8, when I knew the rehearsal dinner would be underway, with or without the bride and groom. The silence felt oppressive as I moved through rooms that had, just hours ago, been filled with wedding preparations. In our bedroom, I mechanically packed essentials into a small bag. As I reached for my toiletries in the bathroom, I noticed Ethan's prescription bottle on the counter. Not the migraine medication I was familiar with, but something I'd never seen before. The label read, Memantine HCl 10 milligrams. Take 1 tablet twice daily. I didn't recognize the drug name. A quick internet search on my phone revealed its purpose. Treatment for moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease. Sometimes prescribed off-label for frontotemporal dementia and other neurodegenerative conditions. My hands trembled as I set down the phone. My father's face flashed in my memory. His confusion in the early stages of his illness, the personality changes, the moments of disorientation that had gradually worsened until he no longer recognized any of us. I sank to the bathroom floor, the prescription bottle clutched in my hand, as pieces began shifting into a new and terrible pattern. Ethan's increasing confusion, his memory lapses, the moments when he seemed to confuse past and present, me and Jade. Not signs of betrayal, signs of illness, the same illness that had taken my father. With sudden urgency, I moved to Ethan's office, searching his desk drawers until I found a folder labeled Medical, tucked beneath architectural drawings. Inside, diagnostic reports, brain scans, consultation notes from specialists in neurodegenerative disorders. The most recent report, dated just 3 weeks earlier, contained the devastating confirmation: early onset frontotemporal dementia, the same condition that had claimed my father's life. Genetic testing confirmed the hereditary mutation. Prognosis: rapid progression, cognitive decline, personality changes. Current treatment focused on symptom management while research trials were being evaluated. He'd been diagnosed 6 months ago. Had been hiding his condition, managing it secretly, all while we planned our wedding and future together. And Jade, had she discovered his medication? Was she exploiting his confusion, manipulating his tenuous grasp on reality? The possibility sent ice through my veins. I was still holding the medical reports when my phone rang, Eleanor's name on the screen. "Mira," she said when I answered, her voice urgent. "Ethan's been taken to the hospital. He collapsed at the venue. My heart is with you right now, feeling the weight of this revelation alongside me. Isn't it strange how the truth can completely transform our understanding in an instant? How what looks like betrayal might actually be something far more complex and heartbreaking. We build our lives on certain assumptions about the people we love, about our future, about what we think we know. When those foundations shift, we're left wondering what was ever real. Have you experienced a moment when everything you believed was suddenly challenged? When you had to completely reframe your understanding of a situation or relationship? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else navigating their own difficult truth. If this resonates with you, please subscribe and join our community of souls brave enough to face life's most painful revelations together. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me, antiseptic and unforgiving under fluorescent lights. Ethan lay sleeping in the room behind me, sedated after what the doctors called an acute confusion episode, triggered by extreme stress. They'd found the medication in his system, noted his diagnosis in their records. The neurologist had spoken to me in hushed tones about progression rates, symptom management, care options. Words that transformed me from betrayed fiancé to future caregiver in the space of a single conversation. I'd sat by his bed for hours, watching his chest rise and fall, trying to reconcile the medical reality with the scene in the garden. The diagnosis explained so much. His confusion, the memory lapses, calling me by Jade's name. But it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain my sister's role in what had happened. "He's stable," the night nurse told me gently. "The sedation will keep him sleeping until morning. You should get some rest." Rest seemed impossible, but clarity was essential. I drove back to our home, the home we'd been renovating for our future together, a future that now looked radically different than I'd planned. The house was dark when I arrived, but a light burned in the guest house where Jade was staying. I bypassed it, needing to see our home through this new lens of understanding before confronting my sister. In Ethan's office, I methodically reviewed the medical files I'd found earlier. The diagnosis had come shortly after we'd gotten engaged, the cruel timing of genetic fate. The reports documented his determination to maintain normalcy, his resistance to treatment options that might reveal his condition. Notes from his doctor expressed concern about his secrecy, his refusal to inform his fiancée. Patient insists on maintaining independence and normal relationships as long as possible, reluctant to become a burden to his partner. Advised to disclose diagnosis before marriage, but patient resistant. I moved through our bedroom, seeing evidence I'd missed. The pill organizer hidden in his sock drawer, the journal where he'd apparently been documenting episodes of confusion, the medical alert bracelet tucked unworn in his nightstand. A text illuminated my phone. "He's sleeping. Doctors say you should come back in the morning. Eleanor." As I set the phone down, I heard the guest house door open and close. Through the bedroom window, I watched Jade cross the garden toward the main house, something clutched in her hand. I moved silently to the kitchen, arriving just as she entered through the back door. She startled at the sight of me, quickly concealing whatever she was holding behind her back. Mira, I thought you were at the hospital. Clearly. I nodded toward her hidden hand. What are you doing? For a moment, she seemed to consider lying. Then, with deliberate casualness, she revealed what she'd been hiding: a bottle of my perfume. Running low, she said with a shrug. Thought I'd borrow some. Like you've been doing for weeks. I asked, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Wearing my perfume around Ethan. Dressing like me. Exploiting his confusion. Something flickered across her face. Surprise that I'd pieced it together, perhaps, or calculation about how to respond. Before she could speak, her phone buzzed on the counter where she'd set it down. The screen illuminated with a calendar notification. Medication 9 p.m. Confusion window. I reached for the phone before she could stop me, opening the calendar to find detailed notes about Ethan's medication schedule, documented confusion windows, and what appeared to be planned interactions during these vulnerable times. You knew, I said, the final piece locking into place. You knew he was sick. You've been deliberately exploiting his condition. Jade's expression hardened, the pretense falling away. I was helping him remember. Remember what? A brief college relationship that ended over a decade ago. Remember who he loved first, she replied, her voice sharp with long-held resentment. Before you took him away, like you take everything. The kitchen, where we'd shared meals, planned wedding details, maintained the pretense of family harmony, now became the battleground for a confrontation decades in the making. I didn't take Ethan from you, I said, struggling to understand the depth of her delusion. You dated briefly in college. He didn't even remember you when you arrived. That's what he told you, Jade countered, her laugh bitter. We were everything to each other until he met you at that conference. Suddenly, I wasn't good enough anymore. That's not possible, I insisted. Ethan and I met 3 years ago. If you were together then, why wouldn't he have mentioned it? Why wouldn't you? Because he chose you, she exploded, years of contained resentment finally breaking free. Perfect, successful Mira with her perfect career and her perfect life. He said you understood architecture in a way I never could, that you challenged him intellectually, that you were building something meaningful while I was just existing. The raw pain in her voice gave me pause. Jade, when exactly did you and Ethan date? College, then reconnected after. We were together when he went to that conference in Boston. She crossed her arms defensively. The one where he met you. I shook my head slowly. Ethan wasn't with anyone when we met. He'd been single for over a year. That's what he told you, she repeated, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Show me proof, I challenged. Photos, messages, anything from this supposed relationship that continued until 3 years ago. Her hesitation told me everything. The college photos were real. Their brief relationship had happened. But the rest, the engagement, the ongoing connection, the betrayal, existed only in her mind, a fabricated narrative built on fragments of truth and long-harbored jealousy. You've been manipulating him, I said, the full horror of her actions becoming clear. Using his illness to make him believe in a relationship that never existed. Deliberately confusing him when his mind is already failing him. His mind recognizes me, she insisted, though her certainty was crumbling. When he's confused, when the medication makes him vulnerable, he remembers us. What we had. What you had was a college romance that ended badly, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. Everything else is your invention. You're exploiting a man with dementia, Jade. The same disease that took Dad from us. At the mention of our father, something shifted in her expression, a flash of shame quickly buried beneath defiance. You don't understand what it's like, she said, her voice breaking. Being the one who's never enough. The one who's always left behind. You've had everything handed to you. Talent, success, love. What was I supposed to do when I found out he was sick? Just watch while you played the devoted fiancé. collecting sympathy and admiration like you always do. The twisted logic of her resentment stunned me. So instead, you decided to what? Steal my fiancé by exploiting his illness. Make me believe he was betraying me. Destroy our relationship when he needs support more than ever. I wanted something that was mine first, she said, the childish simplicity of the statement revealing the depth of her wounded psyche. Something you couldn't take away. He was never yours to take back, I said quietly. And now you've traumatized a man with a degenerative brain condition and potentially accelerated his decline. The doctors said his collapse was triggered by extreme stress and confusion. The impact of my words finally seemed to reach her. Jade sank into a kitchen chair, her carefully constructed justifications crumbling. I didn't mean to hurt him, she whispered. I just wanted him to remember me, to choose me this time. By wearing my perfume, dressing like me, deliberately blurring his already fragile sense of reality. I shook my head in disbelief. You weren't helping him remember, Jade. You were exploiting his confusion to insert yourself into a narrative that never existed. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors when I returned the next morning. Ethan was awake, sitting up slightly, his eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. The doctors had explained that the medication adjustment might provide a temporary window of lucidity, a cruel gift of clarity in the midst of progressive decline. Mira, he said when I entered, relief evident in his voice. You came back. Of course I came back. I took the chair beside his bed, studying his face for signs of confusion. Finding none, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Why didn't you tell me you were sick? He closed his eyes briefly, resignation replacing relief. You found the medical files. At home after you collapsed. I took his hand, noting how fragile it felt in mine. Ethan, it's the same condition my father had. Did you think I wouldn't understand? That's exactly why I couldn't tell you, he said, his voice stronger than I expected. I watched you rebuild your life after losing your father to this disease. How could I ask you to go through that again? To sign up for years of watching me disappear piece by piece? That should have been my choice to make, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Not yours. Not Jade's. At my sister's name. His expression darkened. Jade has been. I don't know how to explain what's been happening. Sometimes I think I'm back in college. Sometimes I can't remember if you're her or she's you. The medication helps, but there are windows when everything blurs together. I know, I said gently. I understand now what's been happening. Jade has been taking advantage of those confused moments. The garden, he said, the memory visibly distressing him. I remember being there with her, but it's like watching someone else. Like I'm trapped inside, watching my body respond to things I don't fully understand. He gripped my hand tighter. Mira, I would never betray you. You have to believe that. I do, I assured him, the truth of it settling in my heart. I understand now. Jade has been deliberately exploiting your confusion. Wearing my perfume, dressing like me, creating situations during times when your medication makes you vulnerable. Horror dawned in his eyes. The conversations that didn't make sense. The references to a past we never shared. She told me we were engaged before I met you. You dated briefly in college, I confirmed. The rest was her manipulation. He closed his eyes, processing this new betrayal. When he opened them again, they held a clarity and determination that reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the diagnosis, he said. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I could manage it alone until after the wedding. Give you at least some time with the man you agreed to marry before he started disappearing. The man I agreed to marry is still here, I said firmly. Changed circumstances don't change who you are to me. But they change everything else, he countered. Our plans, our future, the renovation, children, growing old together. All of it has to be reconsidered now. Then we'll reconsider it, I said simply. Together. The way we should have from the beginning. A shadow of his old smile touched his lips. You make it sound so straightforward. Like redesigning a building when the foundation shifts. That's exactly what it is, I replied, professional instincts surfacing even now. We adapt the plans to the new reality. Find different ways to create beauty and function within changed parameters. For a moment, we sat in silence, both contemplating the altered landscape of our future. Then Ethan spoke, his voice soft but certain. I need you to understand something. There will be more days like yesterday. More confusion. More moments when I might not recognize you or might think you're someone else. It will get worse, not better. I know, I said, the weight of that knowledge heavy but not unbearable. I've walked this road before, remember? With my father. That's why I can't ask you to walk it again. His eyes held mine, love and resignation battling within them. You deserve more than becoming a caretaker just as your life is reaching its peak. 3 weeks after the collapsed wedding, I stood in the half-renovated living room of Thornfield Estate, surrounded by exposed beams and unfinished dreams. The courthouse restoration had been completed on schedule, my team stepping up magnificently when I needed time away. The building had been unveiled to public acclaim, my career milestone achieved despite personal turmoil. Now I faced the more difficult restoration, rebuilding a life from shattered expectations. Ethan had been transferred to a specialized neurological center where they were adjusting his medication and enrolling him in a promising clinical trial. The prognosis remained unchanged, progressive decline with periods of lucidity, but the timeline might be extended with proper treatment. Jade had returned to Morocco after our confrontation, leaving behind a letter I hadn't yet found the courage to open. It sat on the mantelpiece, her familiar handwriting both accusation and plea. Eleanor arrived as I was cataloging renovation materials, deciding what to keep and what to discard. The contractors need direction, I explained, gesturing to my meticulous lists. If I'm going to finish this place, they need to know which original elements we're preserving. If, Eleanor asked, her keen eyes missing nothing. I set down my clipboard. Ethan doesn't want me to stay. He's refusing visitors, making arrangements for long-term care. He says he won't let me sacrifice my life to his illness. And what do you want? The question hung between us, deceptively simple yet impossibly complex. I want what I've always wanted, I said finally. To preserve what's beautiful. To rebuild what's damaged. To create something that lasts. Even knowing it won't last forever, she asked gently. That's the nature of restoration, Mira. We don't preserve buildings for eternity, only for a while longer than they might have survived otherwise. Her words crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate. The courthouse hadn't been restored to last forever, only to extend its beauty and function for another generation. Perhaps love in the face of illness operated on the same principle. I need to see him, I said suddenly. Whether he wants visitors or not. Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. And Jade, will you read her letter? I glanced at the envelope, feeling the weight of our shared history. Some damage can't be restored. Some betrayals cut too deep. Perhaps, Eleanor said, rising to leave. Or perhaps, like your buildings, what matters isn't restoring things to their original state, but finding new beauty in what remains. The neurological center's garden was designed for healing. Wide paths for wheelchairs, raised beds for accessibility, quiet corners for private conversations. Ethan sat in one such corner, sunlight filtering through Japanese maple leaves, casting dappled shadows across his face. He looked up as I approached, surprise and something like fear crossing his features. Mira, you shouldn't be here. Yet here I am, I said, taking the seat beside him. Apparently I'm as stubborn about love as I am about historical preservation. A ghost of his old smile appeared. Some things can't be preserved, no matter how skilled the restorer. I know that better than most, I replied. But I also know that value isn't measured in longevity alone. Some of the most precious things in this world are temporary. Renaissance frescoes, cherry blossoms, moments of perfect clarity between two people who understand each other. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the garden but his thoughts elsewhere. "I wanted to protect you," he said finally. "From what's coming. From what happened with your father. By denying me choice. By facing this alone." I shook my head. "That's not protection, Ethan. That's fear disguised as nobility." "Maybe it is," he admitted. "I'm terrified of becoming a burden. Of you remembering me as a shell rather than the man you loved." "The man I love," I corrected gently. Present tense. "And I'd rather have whatever time we have together than a perfect memory and a lifetime of wondering what might have been." I took his hand, feeling its familiar contours. "We're architects, Ethan. When the original plans become impossible, we don't abandon the project. We create new designs that work with changed conditions." "And your sister?" he asked. "The damage she caused." I thought of Jade's letter, still unopened. Of the complex web of love, jealousy, and wounded history between us. Some betrayals can't be forgiven quickly. But I'm beginning to understand that she's as damaged as any building I've restored, acting from broken places I never fully saw. That's remarkably compassionate, given what she did. "Not compassion yet," I admitted. "Just recognition. Understanding that people, like buildings, are shaped by their foundations and the stresses they've endured. Seeing her clearly might be the first step toward eventual restoration." Ethan's eyes met mine, fully present in a way that might become increasingly rare. "You see beneath surfaces. It's what makes you brilliant at restoration. And terrifying to love when you're trying to hide something." "Then stop hiding," I said simply. "Let me see all of you, the beautiful and the broken. Let me be your witness however long or short our time." The choice hung between us, his to make, mine to accept. In that suspended moment, I understood that true love isn't about perfect circumstances or guaranteed outcomes. It's about choosing someone with open eyes, seeing them completely, and staying even when the blueprint changes. The story explores several interconnected themes. Recognition versus perception. How we sometimes see what we want to see in those we love, missing crucial truths until forced to confront them. Mira's methodical approach to life created blind spots that prevented her from recognizing Ethan's condition and Jade's manipulation until crisis forced her to see beyond her carefully constructed reality. The nature of betrayal. Exploring how betrayal from family cuts deeper than any other kind, especially when it exploits vulnerability. Jade's actions represent a particularly devastating form of betrayal, one that weaponized Ethan's illness and manipulated Mira's deepest fears, revealing how those who know us best can wound us most profoundly. Ethical boundaries in illness. Examining the complex moral questions around relationships and responsibility when cognitive decline enters the equation. Both Ethan's decision to hide his diagnosis and Jade's exploitation of his condition raise questions about agency, protection, and the ethical obligations we have toward those experiencing cognitive vulnerability. Rebuilding after devastation. Showing that true strength isn't in avoiding heartbreak but in how we choose to rebuild ourselves afterward. Mira's professional expertise in restoration becomes a metaphor for her personal journey, recognizing that some original elements must be preserved while others require complete reconstruction to create something that can endure. The inheritance of patterns. How family dynamics and unresolved wounds can create cycles that repeat across generations until consciously broken. The echoes between Ethan's condition and Mira's father, between the sisters' childhood competition and their adult conflict, reveal how unaddressed patterns continue until someone chooses a different response. The ultimate message centers on the courage it takes to face painful truths and the wisdom that can only come through surviving our deepest heartbreaks. It suggests that sometimes losing what we thought we wanted opens the door to understanding what we truly need. Not a perfect, unblemished future, but one that accommodates imperfection, limitation, and the messy reality of human connection. My dear friend, Life rarely unfolds according to our carefully drawn plans, does it? The betrayals that wound us most deeply often come from those closest to our hearts: family, lovers, trusted friends. These wounds can feel like endings, like irreparable damage to everything we've built. But I've come to believe that our greatest wisdom emerges from these broken places. That sometimes we must lose the future we imagine to discover the one we're meant to create. Have you experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you toward greater truth? A painful revelation that, in time, became a doorway to deeper understanding of yourself or others? Share your story in the comments below. Your journey through darkness might be the light someone else needs right now. If this story touched something in you, please subscribe and join our community. Together, we're learning that strength isn't found in avoiding life's devastations, but in how we choose to rebuild afterward.